Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Wednesday. Q&A time, answering your questions that you kindly submitted on Twitter at SonOfChelsea and also on my YouTube community page. Taking a few days off making videos to kind of relax and have a bit of a break from Chelsea stuff. As you may have seen on my Instagram and also on my Twitter at SonOfChelsea, I was away in Europe watching some other football over the weekend. Obviously, there was no Chelsea game, but we'd planned on doing this for a while, so it was so much fun to be out there. I was in Germany on Friday and Saturday, Mainz versus Hertha Berlin, and also Bayer Leverkusen versus Werder Bremen. And then on Sunday was over in Belgium, the final of the three games to watch Anderlecht. So it was a lot of fun, it really was. And I'm writing a Substack currently, quite a way into it, just reflecting on the weekend, some of the good experiences, the differences, getting outside the Chelsea bubble, out of my comfort zone. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack already, please do. It's free to do so, link in the description box below. Already got quite a few articles up on there about Chelsea, about the All or Nothing Arsenal documentary, about Callum Hudson-Odoi, who I obviously watched on Saturday, and some other stuff as well. So hopefully going to be posting more on there, including this piece on my sort of European weekend of watching a lot of football. But let's get into your questions. Firstly, on Twitter, via Garen here, who asks, managers often put, in my opinion, arbitrary timeframes on how long it will take them to instill their philosophy and methods. Case in point, Mikel Arteta's 3 years line. How long do you think it will take Graham Potter to reach full assimilation? It's a very difficult question to answer. I think the first thing came to mind when I was thinking about this sort of answer is not only the loads of different variables that can make something go right or wrong in kind of a coach's time, particularly at a club as chaotic as Chelsea historically, but what are the players like, and do the players fit his methods? And I think one of the things we saw with Thomas Tuchel when he reached his peak very quickly at Chelsea was that squad clearly fit the methods he was trying to instill very quickly, and that helped in that short burst, particularly in the Champions League. The hope is with Graham Potter, so that we don't have to spend a load more money and replace a load of players really quickly, is that the players he has, which I do think he does, has flexible players that very much fit what he wants to do. I think the Salzburg game, which got a lot of criticism, if you haven't seen my review of it, please go and do so. I think it's the last video on the channel. I think a lot of that, to me, there's a hope that there is a lot of players there who could very quickly adapt to what he's asking them to do. So then you're talking about sort of how quickly that peak can be reached. I mean, the thing with Arteta that's quite unique is him getting patience through some very, very difficult periods when I think the majority of football clubs would have sacked him. That period, particularly, I think it was winter 2020 when things started to go really wrong for him, and he's had some other periods as well where I think a club would have panicked, and it's credit that they didn't. And it's a nice kind of story that for once a coach wins out over kind of a group of players. And actually in that situation, I think one of the key things is Arteta getting full power to replace bad eggs in the dressing room, start to bring in players that very much fit what he wants to do, and that young squad being quite sort of motivated and galvanised at this point. And you're seeing that in their performances. How long it's going to last, we don't know. And maybe that's the case with Potter as well, is maybe a lot of that work I think has been done before he arrived, but continuing that work and getting rid of players who don't fit what he wants to do. And maybe because he's got a higher quality of player than Arteta did when he arrived at Arsenal, that peak could be reached quicker. We don't know. As I say, there are so many variables: injury, suspension, politics, signing a player, not signing a player. All these things, I know they sound like quite obvious things, that it's so true that to kind of sit here and tell you, it's going to take 3 years. It may not take 3 years. It may take a year. It may take less than that. We saw with Tuchel how quickly, as I say, in that situation, with his coaching method that just suited the players. Phantom Mantle asks, will we ever truly appreciate how immense and vital N'Golo Kante is and has been throughout his time at Chelsea? I don't think that a majority of Chelsea fans, I can't speak for all Chelsea fans, but I don't think that's an issue of us appreciating N'Golo Kante. I think that maybe what you're seeing currently is the frustration over his consistent injuries, his contract situation. Is it time to move on from N'Golo Kante? I don't think those are stupid things to say, and I don't think having those conversations means that when I'm saying stuff like that, if you've watched my videos, that doesn't mean I don't appreciate what N'Golo Kante has done for Chelsea. I think he has been part of the reason I'm okay with letting him go, is because I think that the value we have extracted from N'Golo Kante is just insane. really, in terms of he has been one of the club's greatest ever signings. I think that chapters will be written in football books in years to come about N'Golo Kante, about the impact he had on European football and how unique of a midfielder he was. And at times, as much as people tried to pigeonhole N'Golo Kante into one kind of holding midfielder, something different, how varied I think his game has been over the years and how it's adapted under different coaches is just extraordinary. It really is. And given where he came from and given how quickly he started to dominate English football and European football, and obviously winning the World Cup, I mean, he is a legend. He absolutely is. I don't see a lack of appreciation for Kante. I think it's just more maybe the current point. And if people are underappreciating him, I think that's a bit of a shame. But we see this with a lot of players, particularly maybe Kante, because with defenders and defensive midfielders, there isn't that kind of glamour of the goals they're scoring constantly week in, week out. But I will debate this forever, that if we don't have N'Golo Kante in 2021, we don't win the Champions League. And I don't know how you can argue against that. Kante was such a defining part of that run, as he was in the Premier League winning 2017, as he has been so many other times. So incredible player, incredible legacy, and I think that will only go stronger once he's left Chelsea. Jonathan Kidd, who's a brilliant co-presenter of the Chelsea Fancast, which I've been lucky to guest on, please go and listen to it. Might Potter fail miserably? Yeah, he might. I did say when we appointed him, it is a bit of a risk because he is very much the antithesis almost of what Chelsea have appointed in head coaches for many, many years. He doesn't come boasting this CV of tons and tons of trophies. He hasn't worked in an environment like Chelsea before with the expectation. The big variable and the reason he's got this job, it's quite clear, is because of the new owners. You know, their vision for the club is slightly different. Well, you could argue radically different to the previous ownership, over handing the keys to someone who hasn't been at Borussia Dortmund, hasn't been at PSG, hasn't won domestic league titles. And I think that's something I still see in conversations about Potter. Like, you know, you're going from Thomas Tuchel, a guy who not only won titles before he arrived at Chelsea, but then continued to win big things at Chelsea. And kind of that mindset of, we're going to give this guy time, this promotion to another job. And despite his clear tactical acumen and I think emotional intelligence and the way he's improved players at the clubs he's worked at so far, you just don't know how he's going to deal jumping into a level of scrutiny where the minimum for a lot of us is just Champions League qualification. For Brighton, that would have been an extraordinary achievement this season. And that's something that, you know, he went through runs of not winning at Brighton. And despite the fact that for Brighton fans that obviously matters, the scrutiny from, say, the media and particularly the calls maybe for a coach's head, you know, at times when things aren't going right, are so sort of fierce on social media, and particularly the way the media is towards the bigger clubs in this country. You don't know how a coach is going to deal in that environment. So we don't know that, and it is a bit of a risk. But my hope is that his ability, his proven track record, I think, of improving teams and clubs and groups of players and getting them to kind of come together as one collective with better investment, with a high caliber of player at Chelsea, can continue Potter's growth as a head coach and prove that he is one of the best in this country. Atol's good 9, a great guy. Met him at 7-Eleven in Orlando. A great story, and great to keep contact with him since. Why have we not had a director of football in place over the years? It's been something that's frustrated me, but I think the simple answer is because the previous ownership did not see it as a key thing clearly within their structure. Listen to Matt Law, I think he was on London is Blue pod sometime last year. I think this was even before the takeover, speaking about Michael Emenalo, and despite the fact that Emenalo had the title of director of football, his kind of power and influence was not the same as someone who has the same kind of job title at another European club. I just felt that it didn't make a lot of sense when I was looking at big European rivals who were doing this, who were getting better success with, I think, their strategy and their productivity from the players they invested in. I think that for me, it was just a byproduct of just a lack of structure that we saw so many players in the final years of the Abramovich era not work out. And also just the chopping and changing, going from one coaching mind and style to another so radically. And you saw the impact and the collateral damage of that, particularly this summer, with so many players who have either been let go for free or been let go for very little. It was all a culmination of those things. So I think it's so important that we get a new sporting director in, which obviously has taken a hit with Freund staying at Salzburg, but it doesn't mean that he's the only one out there. I personally think Paul Mitchell would probably be a good addition if he would agree to join out of Monaco, and there are other ones out there too that I'm sure the club are looking at. So having that structure, I just think is vital at a club as big as Chelsea. And Todd Boehly, despite all of this nonsense that's come out since that speech last week, the big thing for me was the way he was speaking about the communication between, say, Cobham and the first team, which I think is just so obvious. But it's kind of shocking that he alleges this. I wouldn't be stunned if a lot of it was true, that there was a lack of communication there before. There needs to be communication because Cobham is a gift to Chelsea. It really is. And having that pathway and having that communication is so vital. So having that all aligned, which sounds like a really simple, trendy word that we use a lot of times, is just important. So I don't know why we didn't have it. I think it was just for years that kind of structure worked, and then when it didn't, we didn't change, and now we have a new ownership who is going to change that, which I think is a positive. Tom Coley asks, if 35-year-old Olivier Giroud joined Chelsea tomorrow, would he score the remaining 10 league goals he needs to get to 100 this season? Yeah, he probably would. I mean, it's just wonderful to see Giroud. Anytime I'm able to watch an AC Milan game, it just seems like he's still scoring goals, and he still looks really good. And what a good signing that has proven to be. I mean, not only for AC Milan, but I think back to Chelsea. You know, if we could get, I said this, if we could get sort of a Giroud output from Aubameyang, I think that'd be brilliant. And Giroud, out of many bad signings in recent years for Chelsea, particularly in the attacking part of the pitch, he proved to be one of our highest value in truth. So I think he left at the right time, and it's nice to see he's still flourishing in Milan. I think he's had such a great career, but I do think if he arrived, you never know, would he have still thrived? Given now we look to play a more pressing style of game, all the debates around that nowadays, we don't know. But I still think he's such a good striker and has been underappreciated for most of his career. But at the end of it, he's going to come away with a lot of silverware and I think records, as you say. Ray Brown asks, who do you think is more likely to come to Chelsea in January for midfield, in Alvarez or Caicedo? Obviously, the Brighton link, I think it was like 2 days after Potter got appointed, we start hearing Caicedo giving quotes that, if Chelsea were to come in for me, you can't turn that opportunity down. So, something I don't want to misquote him, but, he was kind of flattered by the potential interest. And obviously, you appoint a coach, particularly from one club. We've seen this with Erik ten Hag, and it's not just rumour. I mean, he has brought in players from Ajax. Anthony, obviously Martinez, you think about Malacia being brought in from the Eredivisie as well. So it's quite obvious we're going to be linked with Brighton players. Alvarez obviously was a target before Chelsea appointed Graham Potter. I think Chelsea need to sign a midfielder in January. I really do. I think that it's not just about signing anyone, but I think it's about sending a signal that is a problem area that we are no longer just going to bypass. I also just think it sends out a signal to N'Golo Kante and Jorginho that we are planning beyond you guys, whether you're going to stay here or not. And, I think that's important. Watching Aurelien Tchouameni, it's hard because I don't even think this is in hindsight. The fact that we passed on signing Aurelien Tchouameni in 2021, I think is just such a bad indictment of the previous ownership and just the lack of kind of decisiveness over a position that is so important and defining, I think, on the pitch, that you just and now we're in a position once again where contracts are running down in the key area with two senior players. So I would like Alvarez. I think he would suit. I think he was very impressive against Liverpool, particularly in the second half when they played in the Champions League. Caicedo obviously has proven to be another gem from Brighton, and he's obviously has more Premier League experience. But I personally would like to see us, if we're going to sign anyone in January, which some people may kind of shrug their shoulders and go, why are you signing anyone in January? Do we really need to? Central midfield was the one area, apart from Dennis Zakaria, again, like Saul Niguez, a late loan. Maybe that situation changes because I said this before, Zakaria could be a bit of a wild card and you're hoping that he turns out to be more valuable than I think people expect him to be. We have to wait and see if he gets integrated after the international break with Graham Potter. But I would like to see some serious investment there because it's gone on for far too long. And either one of those players, I like the physique of Alvarez. I think that he very much fits kind of stereotypically, I think, what you'd want in a central midfielder. But Caicedo has obviously played so well for Brighton. And finally, Shy Show asks, who's your favourite Chelsea manager of all time? It is Jose Mourinho. We did this, I think, on Football London. We were speaking about like the greatest Chelsea managers. It is still Jose. I know a lot of people have kind of gone sour on him because of Tottenham and Man United, and I can understand that to a point, but I still think that there is a bit of revisionism over Jose that I find a little bit strange. You have to go back. Like, I think people still analyze Jose, and they think about Jose, and they look at his kind of grumpy fallouts at play, or toxic fallouts at, say, Chelsea or Man United or Tottenham, and then they kind of just put that as Jose forever. Basically, you have to go back to watch Jose at his early time at Chelsea. And I still think, not only in terms of his demeanour and his character and what he was able to do in transforming a group of players, but it was also just the legacy he left. I've constantly rejected this idea made by people, some people who I think are good writers, who have made the argument that there isn't anything about Jose Mourinho in his career, that he's left a legacy anywhere. I just think that's complete and utter rubbish, because it's just completely undermined by Chelsea, because the grounding he left from that original 04-05 to 06 team, even 07 when we didn't win the league, but still won the League Cup and the FA Cup, and you go all the way to Munich and you see a group of players who at times were coaching themselves, or at times had such leadership and so much of that rugged and determination and kind of just that quality and leadership that was there that dragged us over the line in Munich. You look at the players who were important on that run to the final, and they were the ones that very much were transformed under Jose Mourinho. You can look at the 2021 Champions League final, and I would argue that is so typical of like a Jose Mourinho Chelsea 04-05 performance, where you limit the opposition to a few chances, you go over and over again into a weakness of the opposing team, and eventually you get your reward. And it was such a classic thing that Tuchel did, that was so Jose, that when Chelsea went 1-0 up, game was done. So there are things, even as far, as recently as 2021, that I still look and say Jose has left an imprint at Chelsea. He left that domestic dominance. He still has, for me, the best Chelsea team. 04-05 is still the best Chelsea team. And the fact that he came back and won it again is kind of just shrugged off by people. It's like, well, yeah, he won it, but then, it all went wrong in 15-16 spectacularly. But to me, no, he came back and won the league again. He came back and did it again. He got John Terry back into the team, who played 38 games in the 14-15 season. He brought in Diego Costa, one of Chelsea's best striker in the Premier League era, who went on to help us win another Premier League title. Cesc Fabregas, what an incredible signing as well. So all of that, to me, I think coupled up, that's what makes it difficult for, I think, coaches to replicate Jose. I think until someone comes into Chelsea, and why I think Ancelotti is probably the only rival, because he created a team that was unique in terms of style of play. Such an entertaining team that just were blitzing opponents over and over again. And I completely understand why people love Carlo. But I think Jose just wins out because I think his legacy at Stamford Bridge of what he did with a group of players and that team that is still the benchmark for Chelsea means so much. But that is it for today's Q&A. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.